Good day, my name is Artur Sokolov, and welcome to free webinar interview questions for Chief Officer. Before we start, let's check the connection. How do you read me? Please put the marks in the comments from 1 to 10. How do you read me? How is the connection? It might be the case that I can experience the issues with the internet. If for some time I disappear from online translation, then just please stay online and I will reconnect in the couple of minutes. So I can see that you can hear me well. That means we can start. Please don't keep silent. Please write the comments, and I will give the questions that are being asked quite oftenly during the interviews, and you will have the chance to answer on that questions shortly in the comments. If you have some interesting questions that, for example, you faced during the interview, you can write down this question in the comments and we will discuss it. So let's be active today to make this webinar effective. Welcome one more time to the webinar. My name is Artur Sokolov. I'm Master Mariner. I currently work at sea as the Master Mariner, and I also work in the maritime education. My courses were attended by thousands of our colleagues, seafarers. I'm the author of the books Ship Stability, Draft Survey, Oil and Chemical Cargoes Calculations, and I'm the author of many educational courses, such as preparation for chief officer interview, ship's handling, ship stability, ballast water management, and another courses. Please write in the comments where are you from and what's your position and on which type of the vessels do you work. How did we create the core chief officer preparation for the interview? As I have mentioned, this course was attended by thousands of the participants, my main course, Chief Officer Preparation for the rank. And we have collected the questions that participants were asked during the interview. And then we gave the correct answers on that questions. As I can see, mostly we have second officers today and some chief officers. So what is my goal for today? First of all, I would like to explain why do we need to start preparing for the interview already today. We will discuss the questions that we may face during an interview, and I will offer a fast and effective way to prepare for the interview for chief officer position. And for the participants of the today's webinar, I will give the most favorable terms for participation in the course Chief Officer Preparation for the interview. We are Marine Learning Club. You can find our website in the internet. Our goal is to raise the competence of our colleagues. So why should we start preparing for the interview already today? Because the luck is being in the right place and at the right time. But you should also have the necessary skills and opportunities at the same time. So, for example, you can be lucky enough to get the promotion and then company needs chief officer and you will be recommended for the interview. So that's the luck part of the success. But then to get this position, you also need to be ready for this opportunity. So you should have necessary skills and knowledge. The competition is very high today. While you are lying on the couch, your colleague is studying. And normally, crewing managers or crewing companies, they offer not one chief officer for the interview, but they offer, for example, 3 or 5 candidates for interview for the same position. And then superintendent will pick the chief officer whom he liked the most. So among 5 chief officers or candidates for the chief officer's position, superintendent will select the best candidate whom he liked during the interview. The requirements are becoming higher and higher, and we should be ready to those requirements. And the questions during the interview actually becoming more and more complicated. We all know that there are a lot of people, but not so much professionals. Therefore, the best way for the successful career at the sea is to become that professional. It is only in your hands. We all know how we can sell our time for a much higher price on board. We need to move up through our career ladder. And there are basically two ways how to be promoted. This is years of service or knowledge and skills. And of course, knowledge and skills give us the faster way for the promotion. So let's start with the questions that chief officer can get during the interview. Chief officer can get questions on navigation and ships handling, ballast water management, MARPOL, ISM, ISPS, MLC, and of course, ship stability and strength. Let's start with the questions on navigation and ships handling. It sounds a little bit strange that chief officer can get the questions on the navigation. It's not the interview for third mate or second mate, but it is what actually happens. Chief officer can get questions on SOLAS, on safety, on navigation, and even on call rec. The first question is, what is CAT ZOC? Let's answer on this question together. This is category zone of confidence, basically the values that use to highlight the accuracy of data presented on the chart. The next question, we will try to go through the questions as quickly as possible to discuss today as much questions as possible that are being asked during the interviews. What factors does squad depend on? Please answer on this question in the comments. Let's answer on this question together. What factors does squad depend on? I can see the answer shallow water and ship's speed. So the correct answer is, of course, that is the ship speed, that is under keel clearance, and that is hull shape or block coefficient. And if we are talking about the hull shape, which vessel would have larger squat? The vessel with larger block coefficient or the vessel with the smaller block coefficient? This is the next question from the interviewer. For example, you work on the bulk area and you work on the container ship. Bulk area has larger block coefficient and container ship has smaller block coefficient. These vessels, for example, have the same speed and the same under keel clearance. Which vessel would have larger squat? The vessel with larger block coefficient will have the larger squat. The next question about ship's handling. Chief officer is master's backup, and therefore chief officer should know something about the ship's handling. Where will the bow swing when working astern on a ship with a fixed right-hand propeller? We have the vessel with the fixed right-hand propeller. We start working astern, and where the bow will go, to starboard or to port? I can see different answers. I can see to port side, to starboard side. The correct answer is the bow will go to starboard, the stern will go to port. You should remember that the stern will always go in the same direction with the propeller rotation. Of course, if we neglect the external forces which act on the vessel. So when we work astern on the vessel with a fixed right-hand propeller, how the propeller will be rotating. When we work ahead, fixed right-hand propeller is rotating clockwise, but when we work astern, it changes the direction of the rotation. So the propeller will be rotating anti-clockwise, or let's call it, it will be rotating to port. So it will generate propeller transverse force, which is directed to port. And this propeller transverse force will tend to pull the stern to port and therefore to turn the vessel's bow to starboard. Therefore, if we work astern on a vessel with fixed right-hand propeller, the propeller transverse force will tend to turn our vessel's bow to starboard. Explain what is the bank effect. Bank effect is a hydrodynamic phenomenon where a vessel operating in narrow or shallow waters is affected by pressure imbalances, causing the bow to push away from the bank and the stern to be pulled towards the bank. So how does it work? For example, our vessel is located at the hydrographic axis of the channel. And when the vessel is located at the hydrographic axis of the channel, we have the same space for the water on the starboard side and on the port side to flow freely along the vessel's hull. So the velocity of the water flow on the starboard side and on the port side will be the same. But when the vessel is located closer to one bank, for example, closer to the starboard side bank, we can see that there is not the same space on the starboard side and on the port side for the water to flow freely. On the port side, we have larger space for the water to flow along the vessel's hull. On the starboard side, we have smaller space for the water to flow along the vessel's hull. It means that the water velocity on the starboard side should be higher than the water velocity on the port side, because the same amount of water should pass along the vessel's hull. And on the starboard side, there is smaller space for the water to flow, because the vessel is located closer to the starboard bank. And we should remember Bernoulli's principle, which tells us that the larger the velocity of the water flow, the smaller the pressure builds up. And the smaller the velocity of the water flow, the larger the pressure buildups. So it means that over the starboard side, we will experience the area of the low pressure. And this area will tend to pull the vessel closer to the starboard bank. But because at the forward part of the vessel, we have the area of the increased pressure, this area of the high pressure at the forward part of the vessel will tend to push the vessel's bow from the bank, and at the stern part we have the area of the low pressure. So the stern will tend to be sucked towards the bank. So the vessel will alter the course to the axis of the channel under the action of the bank effect. It's called the vessel seeks the water. So the vessel turns the bow to the hydrographic axis of the channel. And what is the main danger of the bank effect? It is unexpected course alteration in the canal. For example, one of the contributory factors that led to the grounding of container ship Ever Given in the Suez Canal was exactly the bank effect. Container ship unexpectedly altered the course to starboard side and ran aground. The next question is quite complicated. What is parametric rolling? Parametric rolling, it is a resonant phenomenon induced by periodical changes in the stability or righting moment of the ship itself when navigating in head seas or following seas. So basically, parametric rolling is when the vessel rolls very hard. And basically, the vessel creates parametric rolling by itself. When the wavelength is close to the length of the vessel, and when the wave passes along the vessel's hull, vessel experiences variations in the stability. When the vessel's middle part is situated on the wave's crest, and forward and aft parts are situated on the wave's troughs, the ship stability is reduced. When the forward part of the vessel and aft part of the vessels are located at the wave crests and the middle part is located on the wave's trough, the stability is increased. And when the vessel rolls, for example, when the vessel is when the vessel rolls to the starboard side and has the angle of keel, for example, 30 degrees, at that moment, the vessel gets pushed back with the increased stability. And the vessel gets additional inertia when coming back to the upright position. And when the vessel is rolling now to the port side, at that moment, the wave passes along the vessel's hull in such a way that the vessel's stability gets reduced. And we got larger inertia of the righting moment. The vessel has larger inertia. The vessel is now rolling to the opposite side. And at the same time, the vessel's stability is reduced. It will lead to the larger angle of heel. So that's basically the idea of the parametric rolling. And interviewer may ask you the most important question: under which circumstances can we experience the parametric rolling? Please write the answer on this question in the comments. I try to give the answers quite shortly. During the course, we give the answers in more details because we have more time for it. But today we are limited with the time, therefore I try to give the brief answers. But let's answer together under which circumstances can we experience the parametric rolling. So first of all, the wave length should be similar to the length of the vessel. For example, the wave length equal to 80% of the vessel's length or 100% of the vessel's length. So similar to the vessel's length. And the second important point is period of wave encounter equals to half of the vessel's rolling period. If you work on the container ship, you may get this question about the parametric rolling. And you may be asked which types of ships are most vulnerable to parametric rolling. The answer is container ships and car carriers. And how to avoid the parametric rolling. To avoid the parametric rolling, we need to avoid the danger zones. Danger zone is such vessel's force and speed when the vessel's natural rolling period equals to 2 periods of wave encounter, or opposite way around, when wave's period of encounter equals to half of the vessel's rolling period. However, we may also experience the parametric rolling when wave's period of encounter equals to the vessel's natural rolling period. Now let's go through the questions on ballast water management. You may get very simple question: what is standard D1 and D2? So D1 is the standard named on behalf of regulation D1, ballast water exchange standard. So that is the standard when we simply perform the ballast water exchange. Standard D2 is named on behalf of regulation D2, which is called ballast water performance standard. That is the standard when we have ballast water treatment system. So let's go further. During the interview, you can get the question about the ballast water treatment systems that you have worked with. You may get the question to describe the principle of their operation. For example, you mentioned that you worked with the filtration plus ultraviolet disinfection system, such as Alpha Laval, or that you worked with the filtration plus electrochlorination treatment system, or that you worked with filtration plus chemical injection treatment system. So interviewer will ask you to explain the principle of the system's operation. If you mentioned that you have worked with the treatment systems that use chemical injection or electrochlorination, then interviewer may ask you, which chemicals do you need to have on board for those systems to operate? Please write in the comments which chemicals do we need to operate the treatment system which works on electrochlorination method. I see the answer, which chemical is needed. The idea, the idea of sodium bisulfite is to perform the neutralization of the ballast water prior to discharge. What will be your actions if during ballasting the ballast water treatment system filter becomes clogged due to dirty water and you can no longer use the ballast water treatment system? In that case, we need to refer to resolution from Marine Environmental Protection Committee number 38781, which was adopted on the 22nd of March 2024, and it is called Interim Guidance on the Application of the Ballast Water Management Convention to ships operating in challenging water quality conditions. And which logic should we follow in case if our filter becomes clogged and we understand that we cannot use treatment system any longer because otherwise these ballasting operations will take a lot of time. So first of all, we need to perform the troubleshooting in order to be sure that our treatment system does not have any technical malfunctions, so that our treatment system works normally, but that is the case of the challenging water quality conditions. When we understand that that is the case of the challenging water quality conditions, we need to wait until the operational demand is met. What is operational demand? It should be included in the ballast water management plan. This is the capacity of the treatment system that is needed for the, let's say, safe performance of the cargo operations. And according to that resolution, operational demand is calculated as the 50% of the nominal capacity. Why is that exactly 50%? I don't know. It is just mentioned like that in the resolution, that operational demand is 50% of the nominal capacity. So when the actual flow rate drops below 50% of the nominal capacity of the treatment system, we can use the bypass. And in that case, we need to make the proper records in the ballast water record book. And then we will need to perform the decontamination procedure when we take in the ballast water by passing the treatment system and when we go outside from the port to the sea where there is already clean water and where we can perform the decontamination procedure. How will we perform the decontamination procedure? We will perform the ballast water exchange plus ballast water treatment. So if we use the sequential method, we will pump out the ballast water and then we will make the ballast tanks flushing, and then we will pump out this water that we used for the flushing, and then we will take in the full tanks on, of course, through the treatment system. Water that we take in for the flushing purpose should also be taken on board through the treatment system. Interesting question. If we need to perform the decontamination procedure in order to recover standard D2 after we took in the ballast water through bypass, and we will make the exchange using the flow-through method, how many volumes of the ballast tank should we exchange? Please write down in the comments. So we took in the ballast water through the bypass, so we did not use the treatment system. Then we went out to the sea and we need to perform the ballast water exchange using the treatment system in order to recover our status D2. How many volumes of the ballast tank should we run through in order to recover our status D2 if we use flow-through ballast water exchange method? So I can see the answer 3 times the volume and 5 times. The correct answer is 5 volumes of the ballast tank. So for the regular D1 vessel that perform the ballast water exchange according to the standard D1 says that for the flow-through ballast water exchange, we need to exchange 3 volumes of the ballast tank. Not the ballast in the ballast tank, but the ballast tank. For example, if your ballast tank has capacity of 500 cubic meters, but there is only 200 cubic meters of ballast in that ballast tank, you exchange not 600 cubic meters, but 1,500 cubic meters. But resolution 38781 says that if you use flow-through ballast water exchange method in order to recover D2 standard, you need to exchange not 3 volumes of the ballast tank, but 5 volumes of the ballast tank. How will you record the malfunction of the ballast water treatment system? Which code will you use? Please write down in the comments. I can see the answer called Foxtrot. That is absolutely correct. And if you have questions about the correct record keeping in the ballast water record book, you need to refer to Ballast Water Management Circular 80 from the 14th of July 2023. This circular from IMO gives us examples of how to make the entries. How will you plan sequential ballast water exchange? So the planning of the sequential ballast water exchange should include risk assessment, stability and strength calculations for every step. We will take weather forecast into consideration when we perform the risk assessment, and then we will create the ballast water exchange plan. Because when we perform the ballast water exchange using sequential method, we need to pump out the ballast from the tank, and it affects our stability, our strength, and our drafts. And for example, if we talk about the weather forecast, it means that we need to take into consideration that if the weather is not so favorable, probably we cannot pump out the 4-peak tank. Questions on MARPOL. What are the MARPOL requirements for discharging of oily washings from cargo tanks overboard? This is the question addressed to people who work on the oil tankers. If you work on the oil tanker and you are getting ready for the promotion to chief officer's position, there is very high chance that you will get such question on the interview. So let's write down in the comments at least what should be the minimal distance from the nearest land in order to perform the decanting of the oily slopes. I can see the answer 12 miles, 200 miles. So let's refer to the MARPOL convention. The first requirement to perform the pump out of the oily washings from the slopes is that the tanker is not located within a special area. So if the tanker is located within Annex 1 special area, the discharge is strictly prohibited. Doesn't matter how far you are from the nearest land. The tanker should be more than 50 nautical miles from the nearest land. The tanker is proceeding in road. The rate of discharge of oil content does not exceed 30 liters per nautical mile, and the total quantity of oil discharged into the sea does not exceed 1 divided by 30,000 of the total quantity of the particular cargo of which the residues formed a part. How do we understand that the rate of the discharge of oil content does not exceed 30 liters per nautical mile? How do we understand that? With the help of what? Can you please write down in the comments? Absolutely correct, because we need to use ODME, oil discharge monitoring equipment. And prior to use oil discharge monitoring equipment, we need to enter the maximum or total quantity of oil which is allowed to be discharged into the sea. And this quantity should not exceed 1 divided by 30,000 of the total quantity of the particular cargo of which the residues formed a part. Let's answer the question from the interviewer. For example, on the oil tanker, you made 3 voyages. You carried 30,000 cubic meters of oil in the first voyage. Then you perform the tank's washings and you have collected the oily washings in the slop tank. You performed the second voyage. You carried 30,000 cubic meters of cargo, but you did not perform the tank's cleaning. And then you made the third voyage and you carried 30,000 cubic meters of the oil cargo. And you again performed the tank's cleaning and collected the water in the slop tank. What should be the setting in the oil discharge monitoring equipment? What is the total quantity of oil to be discharged? So you carried 3 parcels of the cargo, 30,000, 30,000 and 30,000 cubic meters. And you performed tanks cleaning only after 2 parcels. And you have collected this water in the slop tank. What will be the setting in the oil discharge monitoring equipment? What is the total quantity of the oil which is allowed to be discharged into the sea through the oil discharge monitoring equipment? The answer is 2 cubic meters because you generated oily washings after 2 voyages. And during these 2 voyages, you carried 60,000 cubic meters. So 60,000 cubic meters divided by 30,000 give us 2 cubes. I can see the question, what does it mean by in-road? So the definition of in-road is not the same like with the collision regulations. So, for example, according to the collision regulations, the vessel which is drifting is considered as being underway. But according to the MARPOL, being in road means that the vessel should have the speed and the force. And for example, if you go outside from the port just to perform the discharge of the oily washings overboard, then it is quite tricky question. Are you allowed to perform this operation if you are going to return back to the port of departure or not? It already depends on the national regulations. For example, in some countries, it is not allowed to perform such option that you leave the port, go outside, perform decanting, and come back to the same port. But generally, if you perform such procedure, then the course of your vessel should not cross each other. So what does it mean? For example, you go outside, you make some zigzags, and when you perform the decanting of the oily washings, you should not cross the same line 2 times because the idea of being in road is to spread the discharge over the larger water surface. What should you renew in SOPEP every 3 months? We should renew list of national operational contact points. Which categories of noxious liquid substances do you know according to MARPOL? Category X-ray, Yankee, and Zulu, and other substances. Which category of noxious liquid substances poses the greatest danger to the environment? This is category X-ray. Can you discharge treated sewage everywhere if your vessel has a certified sewage treatment plant? The answer is no, because generally we can discharge treated sewage even alongside, but there are no discharge zones. Example, 3 nautical miles of the coast of the state of California. It is the no discharge zone. Doesn't matter your sewage is treated or not, you're not allowed to discharge the sewage there. You are located 13 miles off the coast of the northeast of Australia. Will you discharge community food waste? What will be your answer? I can see different answers. I can see the answer yes, I can see the answer no. So we know the requirement that if we are located within the special area, we are allowed to discharge community food waste when we are further than 12 nautical miles from the nearest land. 13 miles is more than 12 nautical miles. Then theoretically we can perform the discharge. And moreover, Australia is not the MARPOL Annex 5 special area. So if it's not MARPOL Annex 5 special area, then we can discharge community food waste even 3 miles from the nearest land. But why we are not allowed to perform the discharge of the community food waste? Because at the northeast of Australia, there is Great Barrier Reef, and that is the only one place in the world where the MARPOL nearest land does not coincide with the baseline of the territorial sea. That is the only one place in the world where we need to get the coordinates of the MARPOL nearest land from the MARPOL Convention. In the MARPOL Convention, those coordinates are given, and we need to plot this line of the nearest land because we calculate 12 nautical miles or 3 nautical miles not from the shore, but from the nearest land. And those two definitions are different. Everywhere in the world, nearest MARPOL nearest land coincides with the territorial sea baseline, but not here, not at the location of the Great Barrier Reef. Another question. If your vessel trades in China quite often, you may get such question. You are located 15 miles from the coast in the Bohai Sea. Will you discharge overboard the community food waste? So Bohai Sea is quite large sea, and there are a lot of locations where you can stay off the coast more than 15 nautical miles. And theoretically, you may prefer to discharge the food waste, community food waste, and it is not the special area. So what will be your answer? Will you discharge food waste or not? The answer is no, and why not? Because the baseline is passing not along the coast, but the baseline, which is also the MARPOL nearest land, is located at the entrance to the Bohai Sea, because the Bohai Sea is considered as the Chinese internal sea. Therefore, no any discharge is allowed within the inland water. So we will calculate 3 nautical miles from the baseline, and this baseline is located at the entrance to the Bohai Sea. What is the garbage category of oily rocks? Please write down in the comments. I can see the answer, that is category F, operational wastes. Is it permitted to discharge food waste when the vessel is drifting? For example, the vessel has some technical malfunction of the main engine, the vessel is drifting more than 20 nautical miles from the nearest land, more than 50 nautical miles from the nearest land, doesn't matter. The vessel is drifting and we are getting more and more food waste on board and we would like to discharge it overboard. So are we allowed to discharge food waste when the vessel is drifting? The answer is generally no, because the vessel must be in road. And in road means that the vessel should have the course and the speed. But In MARPOL Annex 5, Regulation 7, which is called exceptions, there is exception to being enrolled. When it is clear that the retention of the food waste on board presents an imminent health risk to the people on board, you can get the exemption of being enrolled. So, for example, if you are drifting for the long time and you are full with the food waste and you have only one option, but to discharge this food waste overboard, you can use this exception from Annex 5 Regulation 7. And this exception applies only to being enrolled. It doesn't mean that you can be closer to the shore than, for example, 12 nautical miles. How will you determine whether the bulk cargo being carried is hazardous to the marine environment or not? This is the question addressed to chief officers from bulk carriers. I will consult solid bulk cargo's declaration. It should be stated here whether the cargo is harmful to the marine environment or not harmful to the marine environment. What is SEEMP? Or interviewer may ask you what is SEEMP. The Ship Energy Efficiency Management Plan is a mandatory mandatory document according to the International Maritime Organization, which gives operational mechanisms designed to improve a ship's energy efficiency and reduce gas emissions. What is the main goal of the Ship Energy Efficiency Management Plan? The main goal is to reduce gas emissions. Ship Energy Efficiency Management Plan should be ship-specific to improve the energy efficiency of the ship. How many parts did the SEEMP consist of on your previous vessel? Please write down the number in the comments. How many parts does the SEEMP consist of? I can see the answer, 3 parts. So part 1, ship management plan to improve energy efficiency. Part 2, fuel oil consumption data. Part 3, ship operational carbon intensity plan. Sometimes you may get such questions during the interview for chief officer's position, such as how many annexes are there in MARPOL Convention? We know 6 annexes. How many chapters does SOLAS Convention consist of? Please write down in the comments if you get such question. It looks to be a very simple question, but a lot of chief officers fail on such questions. 15 chapters. That is absolutely correct. It was 12 before, then it became 14, and today 15 chapters. Questions on ISM, ISPS, and MLC. What is considered a safe atmosphere for entering enclosed spaces? Please write down in the comments. So oxygen content 20.9% and LFL less than 1%. And also we need to check for any toxic gases if, for example, we are entering the cargo tank, on the chemical tanker, or on the oil tank. Which equipment should be ready at the entrance to enclosed space? So breathing air apparatuses, spare charge bottles, stretchers, and means of hoisting if the height of the space is more than 6 feet. And the harness, of course, should be provided. What is management of change procedure? It is very popular question nowadays because management of change procedure became very popular today. A management of change procedure is a formal systematic process used to evaluate, approve, and implement modifications to equipment, personal or operating procedures. The main idea of the management of change that it ensures that changes do not introduce new hazards or increase existing risks to safety, health, or the environment. What is near miss? Please write down the answer in the comments. So I can see different answers about what is near miss, but we should remember the definition given in the ISM code. Near miss is a sequence of events and or conditions that could have resulted in loss. And this loss was prevented only by a fortuitous break in the chain of events and or conditions. So that could have happened, but by fortunate chance did not happen. The next question is, what is critical equipment and what are the examples of the critical equipment on board? We should also remember this definition from the ISM code. This definition is given in the ISM code. Critical equipment means equipment and machinery for which the sudden operational failure could result in hazardous situation and or risk environmental damage, and those which is not available as backup or duplicate. This definition is given in the ISM code. And examples of critical equipment, for example, a rescue boat, engine, emergency diesel generator. Questions about MLC. What are the requirements to the maximum hours of work and minimum hours of rest? So the requirements for the maximum hours of work, 14 hours in any 24-hour period and 72 hours in any 7-day period. And requirements for the hours of rest, 10 hours in any 24 hours period and 77 hours in any 7-day period. And here is one interesting thing, that if we have a look at the requirements for 24-hour period, then everything is logical here. So we have 24 hours in one day. So if we work 14 hours, it means that we will rest 10 hours. But if we have a look at the requirements to 7-day period, regarding the maximum hours of work, it can be 72 hours in any 7-day period. So what does it mean? It means that we can maximum work 10 hours per day, and one day we can work 12 hours. But if we have a look at the requirements to the minimum hours of rest, it is indicated that we should rest every day 11 hours. Let's say in average 11 hours every day. 77 hours divided by 7 days give us 11 hours in average. So as you can see, the requirements for the maximum hours of work in any 7-day period and minimum hours of rest in any 7-day period does not coincide. And there is a question, which requirements should we follow if they do not coincide? GMLC Part 2 states whether we should follow the requirements regarding the maximum hours of work, or we should follow the requirements regarding minimum hours of rest. And now the most interesting questions for Chief Officer. Questions on ship stability and strengths. The most complicated probably questions for the future and acting chief officers. So the first question is, what is GM, or what is the metacentric height? Please write down the answer in the comments. What is GM, or what is the metacentric height? It is basically the question with which you may get your interview started. So that might be the first question during the interview. And if you don't answer on this question correctly, then the chances of the successful interview are quite low. Basically, if you don't answer correctly on any question related to ship stability or strengths, it reduces your chances, because chief officer is cargo officer on board, and therefore chief officer should be very proficient with the ship stability and strengths. So let's write down the answer in the comments. What is the metacentric height? the short answer. I can see the answer, that is the distance from the center of gravity to the metacenter. That is correct answer. You can also give another answer, that is the vertical elevation of the metacenter about the center of gravity. That is the vertical distance between the metacenter and center of gravity. And what is the formula to calculate the metacentric height? Gm equals to elevation of the metacenter minus vertical center of gravity. In which case the vessel has better stability with the equal VCG, with the larger or with the smaller draft. So your two vessels has the same vertical center of gravity, equal VCG. One vessel has larger draft, another one has smaller draft. Which vessel will have better stability? Please write down the answer. I can see the answers only larger draft. So let's check. How do engineers understand the position of the metacenter? They perform the inclining test. Let's also perform the inclining test. So we have the vessel with the smaller draft. We heel the vessel to the starboard side. We see where is the position of the center of buoyancy. We see the buoyancy force. And we make inclination of the vessel to the port side. We see where is the center of buoyancy, where is the buoyancy force. So the metacenter will be located here, where this line crosses the center line of the vessel. Here is our metacenter. And now we increase the vessel's draft. Position of the center of gravity is the same, but the draft is larger. We heel the vessel to the starboard side. We see the position of the center of buoyancy, and then we heel the vessel to the port side. We see the position of the center of buoyancy, and we see new position of the metacenter. If the metacenter is located lower than in the previous case, it means that now we have worse stability. Therefore, if two vessels have the same vertical center of gravity, then the vessel with the larger draft will have worse stability than the vessel with the smaller draft. How can we determine GM using GZ curve? To determine GM using GZ curve, first of all, I will set perpendicular at 1 radian. 1 radian equals to 57.3 degrees. Then I will draw the tangent at the beginning to the GZ curve. So here is the GZ curve. I can see the beginning of the GZ curve, and I will draw the tangent to the beginning of the GZ curve. And the point of the intersection of the tangent line at the beginning of the GZ curve and this perpendicular, which I set at 1 radian, will show me the value of the metacentric height. And top popular question which is being asked during the chief officer interview. And this question, the answer in this question, you need to know by heart before the interview, and you need to be able to explain every single stability requirement according to the intake stability code. So the first three requirements: area under GZ curve up to 30 degrees should be equal or larger than 0.055 meters multiplied by radians. Area under GZ curve up to 40 degrees should be equal or larger than 0.090 meters multiplied by radian. And the third requirement, area under GZ curve between 30 and 40 degrees should be equal or larger than 0.030 meters multiplied by radian. So let's have a look at this requirement from the intake stability code. And let's understand what is meant under the area under GZ curve. So we have the GZ curve. And the first requirement is that the area under GZ curve up to 30 degrees should be equal or larger than 0.055 meters multiplied by radians. The second requirement is area under GZ curve, so this area up to 40 degrees should be larger or equal than 0.090 meters multiplied by radians. And the third requirement, area under GZ curve between 30 and 40 degrees should be equal or larger than 0.030 meters multiplied by radians. So we have discussed the first three requirements. And now we can discuss the next requirements. So requirement number 4, GZ at an angle of heel equal to or greater than 30 degrees should be equal or larger than 0.2 meters. The maximum righting lever shall occur at an angle of heel of not less than 25 degrees. So what does it mean? We have the GZ curve, and we check what is the GZ at the 30 degrees angle of heel. This GZ at the angle of heel 30 degrees should be equal or larger than 0.2 meters. In our case, it is almost 0.4, so it is larger than 0.2, so we meet the requirement. In this case, GZ at the angle of heel 30 degrees is less than 0.2, so we don't meet the requirement here. And where is the angle of the maximum of the GZ curve? Angle of the maximum is the point where we have the largest GZ value. And this angle of maximum should be equal or larger than 25 degrees. So here we have 25 degrees, and we can see that the angle of maximum is located further than 25 degrees. For example, 32 degrees, let's say. So in that case, we meet the requirements. Another option, we see our GZ curve, and we see 25 degrees, and we can say that the maximum of the GZ curve is located before 25 degrees. So in that case, we don't meet the requirements of the intake stability code. GM equal or larger than 0.15 meters. Metacentric height should be larger than 0.15. So in that case, we have GM lower than 0.15 meters, and it's not okay. Regarding the GM, let's answer the question. The intake stability code says that GM should be equal or larger than 0.15 meters. But when we work with the stability computer and we have GM of, for example, 0.5 meters, it is still indicated in red. Why? If intake stability code says 0.15 meters, and in the loading computer I have 0.5 or 0.4, and it is marked in red and shows that the stability requirement is not met. Please write down the answer in the comments. The answer is because of the damage stability. The idea of the damage stability is that when we have two adjacent compartments flooded, our stability should be positive. Doesn't matter what will be the value of the GM, it will be 0.1 meter or 1 centimeter, it should be positive. And if, for example, we have GM 0.15 meters, and we have two adjacent compartments flooded, it's, for example, it's not guaranteed that our GM will be positive. And with the value of GM given in the damage stability booklet, for example, this value will be 0.6 meters. It means that our stability will be positive with the two flooded compartments. Therefore, stability computer takes the requirements from the damage stability booklet, not for the GM, not from the intake stability. So the intake stability requirements regarding the GM is GM should be larger or equal to 0.15 meters. But the damage stability, which is included in the loading computer, may tell us that our GM should be 0.6 or even larger. And next requirement, angle of uh, angle of heel due to the steady wind should be equal or larger or less. Angle of heel due to the steady wind should be equal or less than 16 degrees. What is meant under the angle of heel under action of steady wind, which should not exceed 16 degrees or 80% of the angle of deck edge immersion. For example, we have the container ship and we have the wind from the side. And the wind from the side will create the angle of least, the angle of heel. And this angle of heel, due to the steady wind, should be less than 16 degrees or 80% of the angle of deck edge immersion, whichever is less. And weather criterion. Weather criterion should be equal or larger than 1. During the interview, you may get the question, what is the weather criterion? If you can answer on that question, please write down the answer in the comments. The short answer, what is weather criterion? The most simple answer on the question, what is weather criterion? Weather criterion is the proportion of the area B to area A. What is area B and area A? Area B shows us the work of the writing moment, and area A shows us the work of the healing moment. Weather criterion is the proportion of the work of the writing moment to the work of the healing moment. So it is area B divided by area A. It is work of the writing moment divided by the work of the healing moment. The vessel is stable when the available work of the writing moment is larger than the work of the healing moment. Therefore, the proportion of area B to area A should be equal or larger than 1. If you are interested in the physical meaning of the weather criterion, I will show you my illustrations. If you are interested in the physical meaning of the weather criterion, what is that? I can give the answer on that question at the end of the webinar. So if you are interested in the physical meaning of the weather criterion, please put the plus in the comments. So I will remember to explain what is weather criterion. Not only the definition of the weather criterion, but what does it mean in general. By how many centimeters can we submerge the summer load line in the fresh water? By how many centimeters can we submerge the summer load line in the fresh water? Please write down the answer. We can submerge the summer load line by the value of the fresh water allowance. What is freshwater allowance? It is the difference between freshwater draft and summer draft. Where can you get the value of the freshwater allowance? I can get it from the International Load Line Certificate. May we submerge the summer load line in a port where the water density is 1.012? Please write down the answer. I can see the answer is yes. We can submerge the summer load line up to the value of the dock water allowance. And let's refer to the International Convention on Load Lines. It tells us that if the density is less than 1.025, which is the standard density of the seawater, the freshwater allowance is calculated proportionally to the actual water density. So we will use the following formula. Dock water allowance equal to freshwater allowance multiplied by 1.025 minus dock density and everything divided by 0.025. For example, if our freshwater allowance equals to 225 millimeters, then if our dock water density is 1.012, we can submerge the summer load line by 117 millimeters. Explain what is LCB and LCF. LCB is a longitudinal center of buoyancy, and LCF is the longitudinal center of flotation. What is hogging and sagging? Hogging is the condition of the vessel's longitudinal deformation or deflection when the forward and aft mean draft is larger than the draft at the middle. And sagging is the condition when the draft at the middle is larger than forward and aft mean drafts. Which condition is more dangerous for your vessel? If you work on bulk carrier or on the oil tanker, you may get such question, which condition is more dangerous, hogging or sagging? Please write down the answer in the comments. I can see that more dangerous is hogging. Let's refer to the stability booklet of bulk carrier. And we can see here the table with the permissible bending moments and shear forces. Let's have a look at the seagoing condition, bending moment for hogging condition, and sagging condition. For example, frame number 109. So the permissible bending moment for hogging condition is 1,780 kilonewtons multiplied by meters. And for the sagging condition, we can see that the permissible bending moment is less than for the hogging condition. So we can make the conclusion that the sagging condition is more dangerous because the permissible bending moment for sagging condition is less than the permissible bending moment for the hogging condition. Let's answer on the question why. When the vessel experiences hogging, then the vessel's deck will work for tension and vessel's bottom will work for compression. When the vessel experiences sagging, then the vessel's deck will work for compression and vessel's bottom will work for tension. Where can we expect larger tensions? At the deck area or at the bottom area? It depends on the location of the vessel's neutral axis. Vessel's neutral axis is located closer to the bottom because at the bottom part of the vessel we have double bottom tanks. So we have more steel at the bottom part of the vessel. Therefore, the neutral axis is located closer to the vessel's bottom. And the further the point is located from the neutral axis, the larger tensions are there. So the vessel's deck is located further from the neutral axis, therefore the deck experiences larger tensions than the bottom of the vessel. So the deck is more vulnerable part if we compare it with the bottom. And in case when the vessel has a sagging condition, the deck works for compression. And In case when the vessel experiences hogging, the deck works for tension, and the steel works better for tension than for compression. Therefore, for sagging condition, we have lower permissible bending moment. So that is the answer on that question. Please rate the webinar. I hope that the questions that we have discussed today were interesting for you, and that many from that questions you will face during the interview. Please put the marks from 1 to 5. And I will offer to you to participate in the course preparation for interview for chief officer's position. How did we create this course? As I have mentioned at the beginning, more than 1,000 of the participants have passed my course chief officer preparation for the rank. And many of the participants have already passed the interview and work in chief officer's position. And we collected thousands of questions that were asked during the interview for chief officer's position. And then we picked the most interesting questions and we segregated them by the groups. And we gave the answers on that questions. The answer that interviewer would like to hear from you. So which groups of questions will we discuss during that course preparation for the chief officer's interview? That is the fastest way to get prepared successfully for the interview. So module 1, SOLAS related questions. As I have mentioned, chief officer does not get questions solely about ship stability, loading computer, cargos. Chief officer gets various questions, including SOLAS related questions. For example, how many chapters are there in SOLAS convention? How often should you check breathing apparatuses? And so on. Because chief officer is normally the safety officer on board, and therefore chief officer should know what is written in the SOLAS convention. Questions on collision regulations. Module 3, questions on navigation and ship's handling. Chief officer is master's backup, and chief officer should take over the command in case if something happens to the master. Therefore, company would like to be sure that you have the knowledge of the ship's handling, that you can actually act as the master's backup. Therefore, you may get the questions like, what is pivot point? Where is pivot point located? How the vessel will behave, and where the vessel's bow will go to starboard or to port if we work astern, and what does it depend on? And other questions. Questions on inspections and audits. Module 5, commercial operations and documentations. What is bill of lading? In which cases will you prepare the letters of protest? What is cargo manifest? And so on. Module 6, ship certificates and compliance. For example, you can get the question, when should the vessel pass the bottom survey? How often? What is the interval between two bottom surveys? What is anniversary date? When should we get the annual survey of the ship's construction certificate, in the which time window? As I have mentioned, chief officer is the master's backup. Therefore, you should have the same knowledge with the master. Yes, it is expected that master has more experience, but the knowledge should be the same. Therefore, you may get the questions which are mostly related to the master's work. But because you are considered as the master's backup, you should know the answers on these questions. Questions related to calling the US port. What is VGP? Which drills should you perform before entering the US port? And other questions. Questions on ISM code and safety management. MLC related questions. Chief officer is normally the ship security officer on board. Therefore, you may get the questions related to ISPS. And we have collected those questions, and we will discuss these questions during the course. And of course, we will give the correct answers. Probably the most important modules, questions on ship stability and trends. With this module, you will gain the confidence to answer the questions on ship stability and strengths. I can say that future chief officers or even chief officers which already work in rank are mostly afraid of the questions on ship stability and strengths during the interview. Chief officer is environmental officer on board, therefore you will get the questions on MARPOL. And if you work on the oil tanker, you will mostly get questions on Annex 1, but any chief officer will get questions on Annex 5. Module 13, Ballast Water Management. Ballast water management is nowadays one of the most complicated articles on board. Chief officer always has a lot of problems related to the ballast water management, and company expects that chief officer knows ballast water management and knows how to solve these issues. Questions related to deck maintenance, questions related to mooring and anchoring equipment, and also chief officers get questions on crew management and leadership, and questions regarding the different situations within the crew, different conflicts, and what will be your actions. And interesting part is that, for example, when crewing manager offering 3 or 5 candidates for the chief officer's position, and then superintendent perform the interview with those candidates, it doesn't always mean that if you answer all the technical questions correctly, you will get the position, because superintendent pays the same attention to the questions on the situations within the crew, because chief officer is already the management level officer. Chief officer is the one who should manage the crew. Therefore, interviewer would like to hear the answer on the question that he actually would like to hear. This course was already attended by thousands of the participants, and here are the comments that participants left after the participation in the course. This course helped to hundreds of participants to pass the interview successfully. This course is for ambitious second officers who are preparing for the upcoming interview, for second officers who are preparing for an interview for new position or promotion, which may, let's say, happen in the next year, and also for chief officers who want to refresh their technical knowledge before a job interview. Because when you move to another company in chief officer's position, most probably you will get another interview. The lessons will be available for you forever. You can always have a look at these lessons at the Marine Learning Club website. So you will be granted with the lifetime access to the video lessons. Each module costs $15. So 16 modules value is $240. And you will also get the bonus time-stamped question list. So this is the list of the questions that we discuss within this course, and using this list you can quickly find the answer on the question that you are interested in. And also fleet-specific interview questions. Yes, this course includes fleet-specific interview questions. So specific questions for those who work on tankers, bulk carriers, gas carriers, offshore fleet, container vessels, and heavy lifts and general cargo vessels. And also, after the course, you will be able to pass the test in order to assess yourself whether you are ready for the interview. And if you pass this test successfully, you will get the certificate of attendance that you have attended the course preparation for interview. So the total value of that course and bonuses is $240. But for those who make a quick decisions, we give discount of 60% until tomorrow, until 23:59. And the price to participate in the course preparation for the chief officer interview and to ensure that you pass your interview successfully is only $99. Now you can see the button participate. If you press the button participate, you will need to leave some personal details like the name, phone number, and you need to select which messenger is more convenient for you, whether it is Viber or WhatsApp. And you should also leave your email address. The managers of Marine Learning Club will contact you within the next 24 hours in order to give all the answers on your questions that you may have after this webinar related to the participation in the course. You can leave the order and managers will contact you, or you can pay straight away $99 and get the lifetime access to the course preparation for chief officer interview. The nominal price of this course is $240, but because you are participating in the online webinar, because you invest your time in yourself, we respect that and we give the best discount, 60%, for the lifetime access to the course Chief Officer Preparation for the interview. I would like to remind you that you risk nothing, because if you don't like the educational material, that if you don't like how we answer the questions, which questions do we provide, you can always request the refund and all money will be refunded to you. In summary, course preparation for Chief Officer interview includes 16 modules with the questions that guarantees the successful preparation for the interview for Chief Officer's position, and also bonuses like fleet-specific interview questions for tankers, bulk carriers, gas carriers, offshore vessel, container ships, and heavy lift and general cargo vessels. So now let's move to the questions and answers session. Please write down the question that you have and I will answer on your questions. Probably you have some question that was asked to you during the interview and you would like to get the correct answer on this question. So now I'm fully concentrating on the questions and answers session. I can see the question regarding the offshore. The specific questions on the offshore fleet is included in the bonuses. So with this course, you get the bonuses with the fleet-specific interview questions and answers on these questions for tanker, for bulk carriers, gas carriers, offshore vessels, container ships, and heavy lift and general cargo vessels. I promise that I will explain what is the weather criterion. So let's give the answer on what is the weather criterion. So let's imagine the vessel and let's imagine the GZ curve. And now the vessel is experiencing bad weather. The vessel is experiencing the waves from the side. And due to the action of the wave, the vessel gets the angle of heel. Why did the vessel get the angle of heel? Because the vessel experienced healing moment. Healing moment performed its work and healed the vessel to the port side. Our vessel is stable and it is supposed to return up to the initial position. It means that righting moment, should also perform its work, and the work of the righting moment should be equal to the work of the heeling moment to return back the vessel to the upright position. And as you can see, here is given our available righting moment work. So if the vessel is, for example, listed up to 60 degrees due to the action of the wave, in that case, it should still be, let's say, stable, and it will still return to the upright position. But according to the intact stability code, when we talk about the available righting moment work, which is characterized by the area P under the GZ curve, is characterized by that area. So if we talk about the intact stability code requirements, the available righting moment work, this area should be limited by 50 degrees or by the down flooding angle. And also the vessel experiences the wind. The wind blows from the starboard side, and what the wind will do, the wind will increase the angle of the vessel's heel. So it means that we should add some area to the heeling moment, and we will deduct some area from the righting moment. And we may also experience the wind gust. The wind gust is considered as 1.5 times stronger than the steady wind. So the vessel will get even larger angle of heel to the port side. So that means that the heeling moment work will get some extra area, and this area we will deduct from the righting moment work. And now what we can see here is area B and area A. Area A shows us the work of the heeling moment, and area B shows us the available work of the righting moment. The work of the righting moment should be always larger than the work of the heeling moment. Otherwise, the vessel will not be stable with the present weather conditions. Therefore, the weather criterion should always be equal or larger than 1. Weather criterion is area B divided by area A. I hope that this explanation of the definition of the weather criterion was useful. So I will come back to the answers on the questions. I can see the question, all those courses will be conducted physically. You will get the access to the Marine Learning Club platform, and then you will pass my online video courses. And then if you have some questions after this course, you can always contact me to get the answer on the remaining questions. So it is the video recording of my lessons. I can see the question, as a student, what topics are you pointing for a cadets applying a company? Based on my experience, cadets can get the questions, like very simple ones, can get the questions like for the second officer, and sometimes cadets get the questions like for chief officer, theoretical questions. For example, cadet can get the question, what is GM? If you work on the bulk area, or if you, for example, intend to work in the company with the bulk carriers, you can get the question, what is the maximum angle of heel due to the grain shift? You can get the question with the intact stability code stability requirements. So you can get theoretical questions which are being asked to chief officers. You can get questions which are being asked to second officers. So cadet is the position where you can get very various questions, because the interviewer would like to ensure that you have effectively spent your time in the Maritime Academy. And basically, in the Maritime Academy, you get all the required knowledge from the second officer to the master's position. And therefore, after graduating from Maritime Academy, you should be ready for the any question. That is the logic of the interviewer. And of course, interviewer would like to pick the best candidate who has the best theoretical knowledge. Which questions do you have? Please write down in the comments and I will do my best to answer on that question. In this course, we discuss a lot of tricky questions. Sometimes interviewer can ask you, let's say, quite a tricky question, particularly related to the situations within the crew. And we have collected these questions, we have analyzed them, and we gave the answers that interviewer would like to hear. And it is always better to be ready for the particular tricky questions before the interview, rather than to face them first time already during the interview. I can see the question, what certificates required for second officer? COC and GMDSS COC. As I have mentioned at the beginning, normally crewing managers offer 3 or 5, sometimes 10 candidates for the same position. And our goal is to demonstrate the best knowledge, the best competence, the best experience during the interview to be the one who will get this position. And that is very important for, let's say, passing the interview, to demonstrate yourself from the best perspective. And to demonstrate yourself from the best perspective, it doesn't mean that you need to be smiling a lot, that you need to, let's say, show that you are very, very loyal employee. You need to demonstrate your knowledge. You need to demonstrate your competence. Because if the interviewer hires somebody who will make some trouble to the company, for example, chief officer who will violate the MARPOL regulation or who will not be able to perform the loading or discharging plannings, then the interviewer will be asked the question, how did you perform the interview that we hired such incompetent person? Therefore, nowadays, interviews are getting more and more complicated. So which questions do you have? Please write down these questions in the comments and I will answer. And by the way, regarding the second officers, it is quite often when the interview for a second officer also contains the questions for chief officer, like questions related to ship stability, questions related to cargo operations. And the question is why? The answer is serious companies would like to hire somebody who sees himself as the chief officer in the nearest future. And therefore, he should already have the required knowledge for the chief officer's position. And therefore, the interviewers normally use the questions dedicated to chief officers at the interviews for second officer's position. I can see the question for the container ships. Is it also same including 16 modules? So we have 16 modules of the general questions which are being asked for chief officers at the any fleet. And also we have ship-specific modules. Ship-specific modules for tankers, bulk carriers, gas carriers, offshore container ships, and heavy leads. Physical classes or online class. This is online class where you get the access to my recorded lesson. Then you pass these video lessons. And if you have the questions after the interview or you would like to ask some extra question, you can always contact me through the managers of Marine Learning Club, and I will give you the answer on your question. I can see the question. Once I purchase the course, I will only have access to the online material, which I will be able to download on my computer. You will have the access on the platform. How about tankers? What is main point interview for chief officer on tankership? For tankers, first of all, we have the module dedicated to tankers. And if we talk about the general questions, then the most common questions are related to MARPOL and related to ISM, two the most common topics. Thank you for your time and thank you for the participation in the webinar questions for Chief Officer interview. My name is Artur Sokolov and we are Marine Learning Club. See you next time. Bye bye.